Good afternoon. It's 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on Wednesday, the 27th. Thank you for those of you that are dialing in to join us for our TNT field test or TNT update webinar. My name is Missy. I work at the Awana headquarters with the Awana Club ministry staff. I am here today to introduce Chris Marchand yet again. He's our children's ministry director and responsible for leading the charge with the TNT update. Today we are going to go over the topic of transitioning your club to the new program, and Chris has broken out the information by club size, so hopefully that will help navigate you through how specifically to retrofit the new program to your own club. All right, before we get started, there's a few technicalities that I'd like to run over once more with you guys. If you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, feel free to email us at ttupdate@awana.org or use the feature within the Google Hangout just by moving your cursor, clicking the little QA button on the left-hand column, and typing in your question there. Again, we're thankful that some of you have decided to join us live and are coming with your questions. Feel free to ask them as soon as they occur to you so that we have time to respond to all of them. And for those of you that are watching later, if something wasn't covered in the webinar that you'd like some clarity on, please email us afterwards. We'd love to chat with you. All right, without any further ado, here is Chris. Chris, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. Doing well. Doing well. Just thank everybody for being able to join us as we continue to talk about the TNT update. So thanks for taking time, whether you're joining us live right now or even at a later time watching this at your convenience. Just glad that we could be able to put this information out to you, and hopefully it'll help you as you are thinking through all the factors involved with this update coming and being available this summer. This is part B to a series that we did. In our webinars, we did a part A last time that we were on here, where we talked through some of the technical pieces of the TNT update in terms of transition. We spent some time talking about the release schedule, also just some implementation of the TNT update, kind of like as we broke it down based on the next 4 years as we release a new handbook over the course of the next 4 years, going all the way to 2019. But that's in a previous webinar. We're not going to talk about that today. I encourage you to check it out. And this information we are putting it together in a PDF for you. So for those of you who may not necessarily want to hear it in a webinar format, but you just need to see it written down for you, I totally get it, totally understand. And we're going to have that available for you coming here pretty soon. But what we're going to talk about a little bit today for the time that we have is really, breaking it into a couple of segments. One, just going to do a little bit of a refresher. We ended last webinar talking about this, but how do I run TNT if I have 3rd through 6th graders all together in one group? And so we ended our webinar last time talking about this, and just want to sort of refresh our, be able to refresh our minds for a second. For those of you who joined us last time, but if you didn't, and maybe this is, maybe you're watching part B before part A. Just want to encourage you that really where we saw some, differentiation or some different options to be able to look at this particular topic. I just wanted to review that for you guys before we hit into some of the new information that we're going to cover today. And it comes down to, you're going to see a lot of the changes for how do I run TNT, depending on what size group you are and how you do it. A lot of the changes that you're going to, it's really going to come down to how are you going to do small group time, how are you going to do large group time. And for this particular topic of how do I run TNT if we have 3rd through 6th graders all together in one group, just want to highlight some of the things that we mentioned. First off, we did mention that you have 2 options here that you could do. Again, this is if 3rd through 6th grade is all together in one group. One of those options was to run large group time using the new Mission, Grace, and Action large group lesson. So you're just gonna do one large group time. Everybody's gonna be in it. The second option that we talked about, just as a refresher, is if you're running one large group time across 4 grade levels, and this proves challenging, but you're short on space and leaders, we said consider splitting the group between 3rd and 4th grade, 5th and 6th grade, and have 2 smaller large groups in the same room with a leader facilitating each group. This is something that you could possibly do if you have just that type of a setup. And again, just wanted to mention that once you have the large group teaching guide in your possession, we did include in that large group teaching guide just more information on how to build a large group talk based on what kind of time requirements you have. So we built in their recommendations based on if you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We wanted to break that down so we could help you make your large group time scalable, because we know that quite possibly that there are a lot of you out there that maybe don't have a half hour totally committed to large group. And even if you're running that whole half hour, I mean, that's a lot of time, especially for 3rd through 6th graders to be sitting and listening for that entire time. So we gave you some recommendations on there on how you can scale it down a little bit. And then in terms of small group time, we just wanted to do a little bit of review. We said to run 1 or 2 small groups of 5 kids each for the kids using the Mission, Grace, and Action handbooks, and continue running traditional handbook time for the other kids using other handbooks. If space and numbers of leaders is an issue, consider keeping the small groups in one room, but still run 2 or more small groups. I mean, this is something that you can do. Again, I believe I mentioned this in a previous webinar, but I did have an experience where there were like 4 small groups of boys, just TNT boys, all happening in one room. I mean, it was like chaos. Nobody could hear anything that was being said, and that just because the environmental factors weren't, I mean, everybody just does the best they can with what they have, but in this case, I mean, it was just so deafening and loud in there that you couldn't hear anything that the kids were saying. And because it wasn't a good environment, kids started to check out there a little bit. And so I think that that's an important aspect that you need to look at as you look at how are you going to plan your space. That's such a vital component. And I know that if you're like most churches, some churches have dedicated space, but the reality is that also most churches too. I mean, we end up sharing space with either other ministries or other aspects of what's going on in our church, and everybody just has to play together and just in the end just do the best they can with what they have. All right, we're going to get into some new stuff here, which is how do I run TNT if I have 3rd and 4th graders together in one group and 5th and 6th graders together in another group? Okay, we're starting to split out. We're not doing everybody together in one group. We're doing 3rd and 4th in one, 5th and 6th in another. Now let's kind of walk through some of the components here. Okay, in terms of handbooks, we recommend starting all 3rd graders and any new 4th graders on the new TNT Mission, Grace, and Action handbook. Returning 4th, 5th, and 6th graders should continue on in whatever handbook they were working in or started on in the previous year and complete the program as they first received it. So in terms of handbooks, if I run a group and I have 3rd and 4th graders in one group and 5th and 6th graders, if I split it down the middle and I do that, that's our recommendation in terms of what to do with the handbooks. And we previously mentioned that in part A of the transition webinar series. All right, fast track. In terms of fast track, really just designate a 10 to 15 minute time either before TNT starts, during TNT. I just want to maybe pause and go off on a tangent here because we got some questions about fast track, and that I've had quite a few people ask me, what do I do with fast track? Because possibly for you, maybe it's going to be a struggle for you to get some parents to show up and help early. Maybe that's going to be a challenge for you. Maybe you're just wondering, how can I fit this in to the club night? One of the recommendations that I've had that's kind of worked really well is that if you split up your club night based on the 3 divisions of having a game, large group, and small group, and if you do have a half hour for game, sometimes a half hour for game could be almost a half hour too long. So one of the recommendations that I'm proposing too is that possibly during your game time, especially if you do game time together, because I mean, if you do game time across 3rd through 6th grade, sometimes that gym could just be totally chaotic if you run games. So this is going to take some adaptation, but what you could do is split game time in half and do 15 minutes of game time, do 15 minutes of fast track. and then just rotate and switch your kids through. That's a possibility, and so that way Fast Track is immediately integrated into the night rather than having to build it on as an additional segment and possibly having to go out and find additional leaders to run that. So that's just a particular option that you could do for this particular, for just as something else that you can consider. But designate a 10-15 minute time for this. And again, the whole idea behind Fast Track is that you got kids, they're ready to say their verses, they come, they say it, they get the sign off, and that allows you during small group time to have more focused conversation on relationships, building those relationships between kids and leaders and discipleship. And again, we recommend 1 leader per 5 kids to keep Fast Track moving smoothly and efficiently. So think through your numbers and be able to plan accordingly. I do want to bring this issue up too, is that if you are going to have Fast Track leaders, make sure that they have gone through all of your screening and child protection measures. Just to make sure that if they're going to be interacting with kids, that they follow the child protection guidelines and the screening guidelines that you have for your particular club. Make sure that that's in place too, since they are going to have interaction with your kids. I think that's we didn't address that last week, but I think it's a really good factor to bring up too, just to make sure that everybody who's interacting with your kids has been screened appropriately and they've gone through the particular training on child protection. All right, large group time. I'm going to give you 2 options here. Again, we're talking if I have 3rd and 4th grade in one group and 5th and 6th grade in another group. So option 1 is to run 1 large group time for all grade levels using the new Mission, Grace in Action large group teaching lessons. That's an option that you can do. Option 2 would be to run 2 large group times, 1 for 3rd and 4th grade using the Mission, Grace in Action lessons, and then 1 for 5th and 6th grade using the Ultimate Challenge large group books or other lessons of your choosing. So essentially, if you're going to split these 2 groups up, you're essentially going to have 2 large group teaching times. That 3rd and 4th grade is going to focus on the new updated curriculum, and then your 5th and 6th graders, since they're currently going to be working through their current handbooks, to have them working through the Ultimate Challenge large group teaching books that we have, or as I know a lot of other clubs do, they just put together a speakers list and they have guest speakers come in and do that also as well. And again, just want to reiterate and mention that we did provide in the new curriculum options to be able to scale this to particular times in either 15, 20, 25-minute lessons to be able to accommodate your large group. So there's your 2 options there that you could do. In terms of small group time, I would say split the kids using the Mission, Grace in Action handbooks into small groups of 5 kids each. Continue running traditional handbook time for kids using other handbooks, and then consider splitting the groups between more than 1 room to keep the noise level down. So that would be our recommendation if you're going to split your club between 3rd and 4th grade in one group, 5th and 6th grade in another, and just be able to make sure that we're working with the kids and keeping them on track. Now, one of the topics that we're going to last to cover is how do I run TNT if we have separate groups for each grade level, 3rd through 6th? Because the reality is you may be coming to this, and I mean, for some people, your 3rd graders could be almost a number where you're pushing into the hundreds, where they are a large group, just 3rd graders, and like I said, and also just for 4th grade. These are larger ministries. What are some recommendations that we have for churches who have a much larger group? So in terms of handbooks, we recommend all 3rd graders again, and any new 4th graders in the new TNT Mission, Grace in Action handbook. They would start with that. Returning 4th, 5th, and 6th graders should continue on in whatever handbook they had worked on. We had already talked about that. Nothing new changing there. And in terms of Fast Track, nothing new changing there either. I think the larger your ministry, the greater impact that Fast Track can have for your group, simply because it helps you really give appropriate time and address the volume of kids who are coming to say verses. So really, the larger of a ministry you are, almost in a sense, Fast Track becomes it becomes vital in terms of using it, just to make sure that you're not compromising later small group time by the sheer fact that you just have so many kids that need to say verses. Now, in terms of large group time, I'm going to give you 3 options here. And again, this is if I'm breaking up my club, we're going to have all 3rd graders in one group, all 4th graders in one group, all 5th graders and 6th graders, and so on. is that option 1 is to run one large group time for all 4 grade levels using the new Mission, Grace, and Action large group lessons. So that's an option that you could do as option 1. Option 2 is to run 2 large group times, one for 3rd and 4th grade using the Mission, Grace, and Action lessons, and one for 5th and 6th grade using the Ultimate Challenge large group books, or again, other lessons of your choosing. And then a third option is to have separate large group time with the Mission, Grace, and Action, large group lessons for kids using the Mission, Grace, and Action handbooks, and run another large group time for the kids using other handbooks as a third option. That's something that you can consider to do. And again, remember that we've built some information in here in that large group time of how you can just, again, scale it given the specific time that you have. So again, 3 options that you can consider there. So it's really, you got to think through. I think size matters here, just to make sure that kids have focused teaching. But also, you could be a large ministry and you're going to say, you know what, it's just easier for us to have everybody together in one group, and that's an option for you to consider as well. In terms of small group time, I would say split the kids up using the Mission, Grace, and Action handbooks into small groups of 5 each. Continue running traditional handbook time for kids using other handbooks, and then consider splitting the groups up between multiple rooms. Again, much larger ministries, you're just going to have, there's potential for there to be much more space, but it's also the fact that you have a lot of kids. And you need to be able to manage that space appropriately. So unless you have a large space, make sure that you can accommodate small group with the multiple rooms. And I've seen some churches get really creative with their space in terms of how they've managed this. I mean, they've really just done their best and worked with the other ministries just to make sure that if we are going to craft out small group time in the Awana ministry, let's make sure that we set it up to be as successful as possible. So what this may look like for you is really just because the dynamics and the philosophy of the program is changing, you may need to go have some conversations with other key stakeholders in your ministry just to make sure that they understand that the dynamics are changing. Before, it really didn't matter because you all could maybe possibly be put into a big, large room, and I mean, you're just hearing verses and signing off sections. Now we're creating an environment where there's more discussion happening. And I think that there's going to be a greater need for you to make sure that we just have environments where kids are going to engage, and they're not going to be distracted necessarily by noises or other things happening, but they can really focus on what's going on. I think that's an essential thing that just in the planning and preparation for just this change in this update, it's just a great thing that if you could just even start talking about it now, just to make sure that that space is just, it's locked in and reserved for you, I think it's going to set you up for success coming this fall. I just want to kind of wrap it up here a little bit, just to kind of give you some just overarching, just principles, some nuggets, some good things for you to be able to latch on. And the first thing is, don't overthink this. It's good to pay attention to detail. It's good to think through some of these transition issues, but also don't overthink it too much. A lot of times when we try to overthink things from time to time, we tend to lose sight of maybe necessarily what's important and what's vital. And part of that overthinking, really the next nugget becomes, make sure that you're communicating with your teams about this. Make sure that over the course, I know a lot of you are probably wrapping up your time for club. I know we have awards night tonight for our club. You're just trying to get to the end of the year, but go ahead, make sure that you're communicating with your teams just about this new update, and invite your leaders into a discussion. I think one of the least recommended things is that we get through summer, we have about a month until club starts, and then, oh, by the way, things are changing. I mean, it's the more communication that can happen now with your team and with your members, I think it just sets them up to be successful. And it also gives them an opportunity to ask good questions. And if you have questions, your leaders have questions, feel free to ask us. We're going to continue to plan and do these webinars to be able to give you information that's going to be helpful. And one of the ways that we could do that is just by answering them even in these sessions, because it's just like school back in the day. If you have a question in your mind, most likely your other classmates had the same question too. So I invite you, send us your questions, ask them. I mean, this is great, and we will do our very best to get you answers. And then the last thing that I would just say is, because we've reiterated on these webinars over and over again that every ministry context is unique, and it's just different. Every church is different. The way that even possibly you've set up your Awana club is slightly different from another church in another state. So with that, I would just say, if I were to think through something, I'd say make sure that you're thinking, be flexible with this. There's a lot of things that you can do with this new curriculum update. And part of the reason in terms of the design and how we built it is so that it could be flexible enough to work with clubs who are like, hey, I really want to drill down deep, have good discussions. I want small group with my kids. But it's also flexible enough that if maybe your club isn't ready for that dynamic, that you could continue to use these new handbooks in the current context of club as you've even experienced it this past year. So think flexibility, and then in the end, just make sure that you do what's best for your kids. And I know you guys do such a great job at this, but I just want to continue to reiterate this moving, as moving forward, as we just continue to have these conversations, is that you know your kids, you know your ministry, and then just do what helps them, do what helps meet their needs, and do what's best by them. So that wraps up kind of what we were going to talk about in terms of transition. I don't know if we have some questions, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over if we have some questions to talk about, and then we'll probably close it out. So, Missy, do we have any questions?
You bet. We've had questions actually coming in ever since we posted our last webinar all throughout the week on our email channels. So thank you all so much for sending those in. It's awesome to be able to respond to you guys live, person to person, rather than through that disconnected way that is email. So thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to respond to you guys in this conversational platform and manner. But I think if I could put a bow on several different emails that have come in, Chris, I think there's still some confusion around club night structure and how much time should be spent on each one of these separate components. And I know you kind of brushed on it based on the transition and different club sizes, but hypothetically speaking, if a club night is an hour and a half long, what should be the order of the different components of the night with the new TNT structure, and roughly how much time should be spent on each one of those pieces?
Sure. I can go ahead and answer that. That's great question. We've always, in my mind, and I do think we have talked about this too in a previous webinar, but we have three divisions of the night. We have game time, we have large group, we have small group. One of the questions, that question does become, okay, so how much do you spend on, each component? Because on average, most clubs do operate within an hour and a half. I know some go 2 hours, I know some go 1. So you're going to need to be able to adapt up or down based on your time constraints. But if we're looking at maybe just the average being like an hour and a half, I would structure it this way. If I had that time frame, I mean, you're looking at automatically I would start with game and fast track. That component, mainly because your kids just they have energy. They've been at school all day, most likely sitting down. I mean, they just came from dinner. I mean, they have energy to burn. If you don't burn that energy right away, again, not all the kids are the same, but a lot of times, a lot of groups put game time specifically on the front end, simply because they have kids that need to get energy out, and it's going to help have better conversations. And even allow them to be a little bit more focused later on in the evening when you're talking about serious or important things. So in there you could do half hour of game time. You could split that half hour between game and fast track again if you wanted to do that. So do 15 minutes game, do 15 minutes fast track, have everybody in the gym, and then just swap them out and rotate them through. That's a way that you can incorporate fast track into the night rather than building it on at the front end or even at the back end. Because it can be challenging to put fast track also at the back end, simply because the Awana night, it's closing out, people want to get home, parents are coming to pick up their kids, everybody's in a rush, and that can just create some unique issues for doing it that way. Then I would build in I would go from game time for that first half hour. The next half hour I would spend in large group. One of the things with that half hour, when I say a half hour, I'm also building into it the transport time from location to location. So in actuality, that 30 minutes of game time may actually look like only 25. Because, and again, it all depends on how you're transporting your kids throughout the building, but you might need to build in anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of transport time just so that your kids can get from place to place they need to be. But large group time, I would say for a large group lesson, I mean, if you're going beyond 25 minutes, you know, you must have an incredibly dynamic topic that you're talking about. But most likely, once you cross that 25-minute barrier, I mean, the sponge that is your kids' brains starts to deteriorate. Their heads are already full coming into your club night. I would say I would much rather have a leader talk concisely and clearly during that time. So thinking about it more in like that 15 to 20-minute range. As a large group talk rather than hitting that 25, 30-minute range. Simply because, I mean, these kids are coming in with their heads so full, we want to make sure that, that we can have opportunity to share clearly the message of the gospel, but also not overwhelm them with information to the point where they're just checking out because, I mean, they just can't do it anymore. So in terms of that, and then last, small group. If anything, I would make sure that we have more time for discussion in small groups. So again, thinking there is that's a half hour. I would push that to 25, even doing the full 30 minutes there because there's not necessarily transport time at the end of that because kids are going home afterwards. But simply because it could take you 5-10 minutes just to break the ice with your kids. So you're looking there at having, anywhere from 20 to 15 minutes of really good discussion time. Every small group leader is going to need to be able to manage their group appropriately within their constraints. But I would be more inclined to have a longer small group time and a shorter large group time, just to be able to allocate the necessary time to them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I would divide the night. Based on how the program is designed to best meet the objectives.
I think that's fantastic, Chris. Thanks so much for that advice. And again, like you said, it varies based on the needs of the leaders, the needs of the kids, and of course the resources that you have available at your church, your space, the amount of leaders. So again, with all the variables, know that this is all advice that's to be taken with a grain of salt, but it's good to know the recommendation from your experience and your standpoint as director of the ministry.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Right now, this pretty much wraps up all of the major questions that we had today that were outlying. I really want to remind the audience right now, though, that we are going to have all of this information. What Chris went through in the last two webinars is going to be provided to you via the web at awana.org/TT update. So you can download that as a PDF and use it as a roadmap. We also hope that these webinars, should you come and watch them at a later date, that you use them. If you have a question that wasn't answered, please email us. But also use them to train your teams. I hope that there's something that become valuable to you in a greater way, rather than just training yourself or getting a response to something that's specific. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and close us out. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, Chris, to our leaders today?
Oh, just again, thank you for what you do. If you have questions, we would be more than happy to answer them. Encourage you to send those in, but keep doing what you're doing. I'm so excited for the fall and getting this new curriculum into the hands of kids and leaders. And anything that we can do to support you, please let us know. Appreciate what you do. Thank you for just your commitment to reach kids with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you have a great afternoon and a close to club year. And we're out.